Over to you, James.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We are just going to start in probably just 2 minutes. Just want to give everyone a chance to jump in. Some folks don't make it right at the top of the hour sometimes. So at just 2 minutes after the hour, we will get going. But I'll start with a couple announcements, updates for the folks that are here. So I'm James from Animalia side, who are APOPO's partners in putting this event on. And if you are one of the people who donated for the Magawa tea, thank you for the kind donation to APOPO. And just an update on your tea. I'm actually wearing it, so you can see what it looks like in the wild. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful long sleeve tea, and you're going to love it. Just in terms of on that, a few folks probably already have their tea. We sent out the first batch a couple weeks ago, but we had so much interest, more than we thought we would. We figured most people would be getting the $5 tickets, but most people got the Magawa tea. So we had to do another production run that just got done yesterday, sent to the printers, and then next week it'll be sent to a fulfillment center. So most of you will get your teas probably a few weeks out still. So apologize for that delay. But don't worry, they're coming. They're beautiful, and you're going to love them. All right, so to get started, before we turn things over to Christophe here, I'm going to share a couple slides. Give me 1 second. All right, so this is our event today in honor of the incredible Magawa, the HeroRAT from APOPO, and you're going to be learning a lot more about Magawa himself, as well as all the other work APOPO does with their HeroRATs, and it's pretty incredible. I met APOPO through Dr. Cindy Faust, who you're going to be learning from and doing a couple talks with today, and had her on our podcast at Animalia, and was just blown away by the work that team does, and just felt more people needed to know about it, and it needs to be celebrated more. So when we found out Magawa was retiring, we thought this was a great opportunity to honor him by sharing the work of APOPO and the incredible team that they have. So that's today. The agenda, we have 5 talks overall. Each talk will be going for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then some opportunity for some question and answers at the end. And then at the very end of the event today, if you're still sticking with us, we have a cocktail party, a virtual cocktail party, where you'll be able to just enter the cocktail party and get matched with different folks for 5 minutes at a time and say hi. It could be another attendee. It could be one of the speakers. It won't be Magawa, sadly. Magawa is sleeping. Magawa lives in Cambodia and is sleeping. But we do have some videos from his retirement party that have not been published, that have not been seen by others at the end, that Lily will be showing. So you will get a first look at Magawa's retirement party. And then real quick, I want to say thank you to Lefebvre, who's sponsoring this event. And they make these rascally rat nutberry NutriBerries. It's supposed to be a fun food that is both healthy for rats. A lot of you are rat owners and rat companions and have rat pets out there. But yeah, so check out Lefebvre. It's a great company, great product, and we will be also sharing a link and a promo code if you're interested in these NutriBerries at the end of the event, and sending it out in an email to everybody on Monday. And with that, I will kick things over to Christophe. One quick last reminder, in the right-hand corner, you should see an option to donate. Don't feel like, most of you obviously are here because you made a donation. Don't feel like you have to donate more, but if you'd like to, or anything here inspires you, those donations go right to APOPO as well. So feel free, but absolutely don't feel obligated. All of you were kind enough to make donations to be here today, so we really appreciate that. All right, Christophe, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Christophe Cox. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of APOPO. I think good morning to most of you. For us here, it's evening. We are in Tanzania in our training and research center here in Morogoro. And I'm going to show you a few slides on how everything started with APOPO and where we are today, and especially about demining. And after that, you'll hear my colleagues who talk about tuberculosis, the research, animal welfare, and all the other aspects of APOPO. So let me share some slide here. I hope you can all see that. So this is my colleague Bart Wietjens. We were schoolmates, and Bart is in fact the guy who came up with the idea of using rats to detect landmines. This is myself. This was the year 1998, just after we started the feasibility study in Antwerp. But the story, in fact, started a few years earlier. That was when I was working in Kenya. And I went to Kenya because in Belgium we had a military duty, but you could exchange that by doing social duty. So I went to work in Kenya. And Bart was in Belgium and he supported our project. Now, this was 1994. And this was the time, in fact, before internet. So Bart and me, we were still writing letters to each other, 3 letters per week, you know. And after a year, I got a letter saying, I'm gonna train rats to detect landmines. And he was also a good painter, so I got his letter with some drawings of a rat and saying, I'm gonna train a rat to detect landmines. I thought, oh gosh, he must have had a very night, but no, that's not what happened. Bart, in fact, made the real analysis of the landmine problem, and detection, he found out, was to be the major bottleneck. And an analogy with mine detection dogs, which everybody knew, he picked up the idea of using rats. Now, why rats? Because, of course, they are cheaper, they are smaller, they are easier to maintain. And rats are also very trainable. They like doing repetitive tasks. So when we started, because both Bart and myself, we were designers, we came from the industrial design school. A third member joined the team, our biologist, Ellen van Krinkelsven. In fact, she came straight from Congo, where she was doing bonobo research. And this is how we started early 1998. Bart had identified through the University of Antwerp the giant poached rat as a suitable candidate because the giant poached rat lives for 8 years. It's a bit taller. They live underground, you know, so they have the habit of searching food and searching stuff underground, which was very suitable to landmine detection. So we sent the first rats from Tanzania, where our university had a collaboration, to Belgium. But before we could start training, we had to breed those rats, and that was not so difficult, not so easy. So we had to start with these small rats here, which we just bought in the pet shop, while we were trying to mate the chrysottomies and have them breed. So it took us 2 loads of rats shipped from Tanzania to Antwerp before we got the first chrysottomies or African giant poached rat born in Antwerp. So this was the very, very first rat, which a Popo rat in the captivity. His name is Onzo, and he would later be trained and come back to Africa with us. So we started experimentally, and in fact, this was one of the first rats in Antwerp still, trained on the detection of explosives. We only had 1 year funding, you know, and after the first year we had administrator from our grant coming, and, you know, the small rat would pick up a piece of TNT, which we threw in the sandbag, in the sandbox, and drop it in front of his feet. And he said, well, I don't know much about animal training, but this looks good, you know, and that is how we got the second grant. And in fact, here you see the primitive methods, how we trained those rats initially with some TNT under a metal lid, and we had to put the plastic on a stone so that the rat would not carry around with the TNT. But this was good enough as a feasibility study. We proved the point that the rat could be trained to detect TNT reliably. And so in the year 2000, we moved to Sokoine University of Agriculture in Morogoro, Tanzania. And that is still now 21 years later, where we are broadcasting from now. But when we came here, again, everything was very experimental. We were in the very early phases, and we tried a lot of stuff. On the left slide, you see here a cart we made with a long arms stretching out over the cart to stretch out over the minefield, in fact, and that would be searching from a leash in the minefield. But clearly this didn't work 100% well, because the rat could find some explosives, yes, but the rat would not search systematically. It would leave a lot of empty pockets unsearched. We even went to the extent of making a small rat cart, which you saw here on the right side. We helped ourselves with the local equipment which was available. This is a kind of Skinner box which we had from a Belgian university. We had a sniffing hole, so we drove over different containers containing TNT and not TNT. And if the rat indicated the explosives, we connected the brake to a food pellet dispenser, and each time the rat would get a food pellet. But again, this system didn't prove too practical to go on a real minefield. Another technology we were working on, which I personally was working on for several years, was the REST system, meaning remote explosive scent tracing. This was a system which was used in Angola, developed by the South Africans, and it was used in cargo and also in minefields. And basically, you go with a kind of vacuum cleaner over a suspected area, and instead of bringing the rat to the landmine, you bring the surface dust to the rat. And the rat would then smell the container and figure out if the soil sample was containing explosives or not. So you see here the training chamber which we made, which would go around the room and allow the rat to quickly sniff and evaluate a series of samples. Meanwhile, back on the field, we had developed this wheel, which would now allow the rat which leashed to a rope under this wheel, which would allow the rat to go left and right to the handlers on both sides, and in fact, systematically search a minefield in half-meter lanes. So that was a big progress. We had a system where the rat would cover the whole area systematically. And if she finds a landmine, there was going to be a click and a food reward. And this was actually working quite well. And we translated this into this system, which is not a metal wheel anymore, which was logistically a bit difficult to go on a real minefield. But here, we just use a rope which is connected to the two handlers with a big elastic, and a small leash glides over this rope and allows the rat to go up and down, and the handler, which you have one on both sides, will make steps sideways of half a meter, and in this manner the rat covers the field reliably. So this system was first accredited by the National Mine Action Standards in Mozambique, dating 2004. And in fact, this picture is from Mozambique, and Mozambique was also APOPO's best success, because Mozambique was declared mine-free ahead of any other major undermined country in 2015. And I'm happy to say that in the 5-6 years running up to that declaration, APOPO did more than half of the work in most of the provinces in Mozambique. And APOPO up to date is still in Mozambique for other kind of work, clearing ammunition storages and building peace. And then back to the REST system, the remote explosive scent tracing. This was also another cage developed for that system, but the remote explosive scent tracing system never worked. It was not reliable enough, so we stopped with the ambition to implement it in the field. But as a spin-off of the technology which we had developed of having a rat sniffing various samples in a caged setup like this one, we developed several applications, one of them being tuberculosis detection, but there are also other ones like detection of other disease and other samples, which my colleague Dr. Fast will talk about later, for which this technology is still used. So then, fast forwarding from these initial days to where we are today, is almost 20 years fast forwarding. So today, APOPO has become a global NGO, or an NGO with a global presence. And as you can see on the map, we do not only have sniffing rats today, but also sniffing dogs. And why that is so, I will explain later. And currently, we have demining programs in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Angola, South Sudan, in Africa, and then also in Cambodia and Turkey. And we have tuberculosis detection programs in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Mozambique. On top of that, we have two foundations, one in Switzerland and one in Washington, D.C., for liaison and fundraising. And our administrative head office is still in Belgium, although we only have one person there and our board. But the main concentration, both of our administration, our research and everything, is in Tanzania. So our vision is to create a better world as leaders in scent detection animals. And APOPO's mission is to protect people and the planet with innovative solutions using trained rats and other scent detection animals. So we did revise our mission and our vision a few years ago. And as you can see, we added other scent detection animals, which are the dogs, to our mission. And we also added protecting the planet, because I think it's every organization's plight to do so. And our rats, as Dr. Fast will explain later, can be used for various environmental applications. Our core values are quality, innovation, social transformation, diversity, and solidarity. First, quality. Quality is very important for us, because we have noticed that in the landmine detection industry, if you miss a mine with a mine detector, with a metal detector, it happens. It's considered as a normal thing. If you miss a mine using a big machine, it's very normal, because we know they miss. If you miss a mine with an animal, they will talk about you, and this story will go on and on and on. So for us, it's very, very important, not only, of course, for the reputation of the company, but especially for the safety of the people. And that is why our rats are accredited to the highest standards. And as far as we have documented, our rats have never missed a landmine in the field. Innovation is, of course, very important for us, and that's something Dr. Fast will talk about later. We have social transformation. We are here to change lives, and we're also here to build capacity APOPO is not a short-term intervention. We create a local economy, a local industry, and we build the necessary capacity for this to stay. APOPO has an extremely high diversity, both in terms of our beneficiaries, but also in terms of our staff. To give you an example, we just started a new project in Turkey using dogs, and we have the people from the Balkans, we have people from Jordan, we have people from Colombia, we have people from South Sudan, all together in one team training our dogs. And of course, solidarity. As an NGO, we share with the individuals and we share with our partner organizations the means we have and the capacities we have. So at the moment, we have 3 strategic goals. One is to deploy cost-efficient mine action in the affected countries. The second is to accelerate TB diagnosis in high TB burden countries, which my colleague, Dr. Negussi, will talk about just after my presentation. And then our third strategic goal is to research and develop innovative detection rats technology applications. So now I'm going to talk a bit about mine action specifically. So the landmines are still in over 60 countries of the world with over 5,000 accidents annually, and a big percentage of those are children. 80% are innocent civilians. And it's, in fact, landmines form a barrier to development, and they're very slow and expensive to clear. Our approach is not only about the animals, of course, it's an integrated approach. So it's very often that demining operations only starts years after the war ends, and then you have an area there which is suspected. So we start with a survey to try to shrink the suspected area down to a manageable level. And then we start a technical survey where we use the animals to check where the mine belt is, in fact, because animals are very quick gatherers of information. And it helps us to narrow down the area where the real mines are. Then if the rat gives an indication on a landmine, you'll have the metal detector confirm this and remove the mine. But before we enter into the minefield, very often we do have to clear the bush with this heavy machinery, because minefields are typically completely overgrown and nobody can enter, no animal, no person. But the rats, they are very suitable and very fast because they can do the area of a tennis field in about 40 minutes. And that will take 40 days for a metal detector. Why? Because the metal detector will pick up the thousands and thousands of false positives, which are all pieces of previously exploded bombs, which are scattered around. And each time there will be a beep signal. The guy has to withdraw, take a brush, take out a piece of metal and check again. So it's a really slow and tedious job. So as I said, this is how we work. The rats work in boxes with handlers on both sides. And the rat can do in 30-40 minutes what a guy with a metal detector can do in 4 days. Here you see one of our female deminers. We used to have a full female deminer team in Mozambique. And I can say when I visited there, I've never seen such a cleaned minefield like with our women team. And this is the results, the impact we made in Mozambique, where we found a staggering 83,000 landmines clearing over 10 million square meters for local communities. Angola, where we are still present, we have found less landmines there, but that doesn't mean it's less effective, because you cannot predict the amount of landmines you're going to find. This is never a KPI. We found one landmine just outside the play yard of a school, and this mine had been there for years. So sometimes finding one or a few landmines can liberate a whole community. And now we have a beautiful new project. This is in Zimbabwe, in fact, in one of the biggest transfrontier parks in the world, which connects the Kruger National Park in South Africa, the Limpopo Park in Mozambique, and the Gonera Zoo Park in Zimbabwe. And where we are clearing the mines is a 37-kilometer minefield with a very high density. We expect a few thousand landmines per running kilometer. And the problem is, it's not only danger for people, but also for animals. So we find a lot of animal remains in the minefield. So we hope by clearing these landmines that we do not only contribute to the safety of the people there, which is a very poor and remote area, but also to the safety of the animals and to the tourism, and that people can start ecotourism in that beautiful part of the world. Our biggest project in the moment, demining project, is in Cambodia, where we're operational since 2014 and where we partner with the biggest local demining NGO in the world, Cambodia Mine Action Center. We have cleared about 50,000 landmines already in Cambodia, and we are currently working in 4 different locations with several partners, not only CMAC, but also Mines Advisory Group. And our hope is to clear the Preveheer province. And what you see here is part of the Preveheer temple, which is on the border with Thailand, and where there was still unrest up till a decade ago, as recent as a decade ago. This has a very big potential for tourism. The area is still undermined. The Preveheer province is one of the poorest left behind provinces. And that's exactly why APOPO wants to go and work there, to make the province impact-free, mine impact-free, within the next 5 years. So both for technical and for strategic reasons, we started in 2017 also with technical survey dogs. Technical survey dogs, they can penetrate the bush. We teach them to go in lanes of 40 meters straight, and that to check also where the mine belts are. This step, before we do full clearance with the rats who do a microsearch, eliminates the need of bush cutting all the areas, which is of course a very big ecological advantage, but also a very big cost advantage. The result of such a search, so that the rat is aided by a camera and a communication system. You see on the map on the right-hand side, and the blue lines represent where the dog has searched, and the red dots is where the mines were found. So this system is as recent as 2019, 2020, when we finished a first test and published it, and it has only last year been approved by the United Nations as a formal mine detection system. In total, since we started, APOPO has cleared about 140,000 landmines and unexploded ordnances, and thereby we have freed about 1.7 million people from the threat of landmines. Now 1.7 million people is just a number. It's a big number, but I just want to tell you the story behind one of those people. This is Louisa, and Louisa is 65 years old. She has about 10 kids and a lot of grandkids, and she lives in Angola. And when the war started there 30 years ago, before that she had a good life. They were growing enough food to maintain her family and all that. But when the war started and they came close to her house, she had to flee with her family. They had to hide in the forest. They had to hide in the swamps. They had to go to the next province, and they ended up in a provincial capital, next provincial capital town, where they started to basically beg on the streets to feed the family. They call that internally displaced people or internal refugees. And this lasted till 2002, which is only 20 years ago, till she could come back to her land. But when she came back to her land, she found landmines everywhere around. So she had to stay on the hard parts, because she had seen 2 neighbors dying from stepping on landmines. And the most difficult thing here is to keep the kids inside. You can imagine such a situation if you have 10 kids, to keep them inside and keep them on the paths. So when APOPO came, she was, of course, very surprised about the rats finding landmines, and she couldn't believe what she saw. And it was only when the chief of the village basically came to tell the villagers that all the landmines in the village were cleared and people are now safe to farm, that she could pick up her life again, which she left 30 years ago. So that's the story of Louisa, one of the 1.7 million people which we have been able to free of landmines. And as a last slide to end my talk, I just want to say something about the beautiful project we started. Just like every other organization, APOPO has a carbon footprint. We are an international organization. We fly around. You see the big machines which we have to use to clear the bush. So we do have a carbon footprint, and we don't want that. So therefore, in collaboration with a local Tanzanian organic farming organization, we have started a project, a tree planting project. And so far, APOPO has planted 18,000 trees in the last 5 years. But it's more than a tree planting project. It's integrated in organic farming. And basically, the money we use for this project, 60% of this money goes straight to the farmer. They will maintain the trees. They will maintain the trees for 5 years, and then it becomes their property. They will also choose which trees. So we have a variety of 37 trees, which we have planted. And APOPO wants to, in the future, really expand on this project, hoping for a better planet. So I thank you very much for this. And if there are any questions, please welcome to ask them.
Thank you, Christophe. So folks know there's 2 ways to ask questions of Christophe. You can either ask them in the chat, and we'll try to get to everyone we can, or you can also ask them live by hitting the microphone request on the bottoms of your screen there. So yeah, we'll and Emma's here too. So feel free to ask any questions. Again, you can ask them in the chat.
Yeah, I do have one question that was asked actually already, Christophe, and the question was whether or not we replant or reforest after landmine clearance.
Well, that's a good question, and this is something we are getting more engaged in. I must admit that initially we have been focusing a lot on our part of the job, which is the landmine clearance. But gradually, we are getting more and more involved in community development. For example, in the Preveher province, in Cambodia, we have some collaboration agreements with farmers' organizations and all that. Because a lot of the farmers there, they are quite, let's say, unskilled. They only know a few crops. They don't have access to markets. So we are going to do more to really lift up the communities in the areas where we work.
Okay, just checking the chat box. I don't know if there are any other questions in the chat. Oh, what drew you to wanting to help solve the landmine problem?
Sorry, come again?
What drew you to wanting to help solve the landmine problem?
Sorry, I haven't understood it.
So what made you want to help solve the landmine problem? I guess, why were you inspired to help clear landmines particularly?
Oh, well, as I said in the beginning, the idea of using rats for landmine detection came from my colleague Bart Wietjens. We were schoolmates in the design school, and we got a lot of projects to be implemented for in Africa, in fact. And Bart, he was always very interested in the prostheses, the work Handicap International was doing. So he got into the sector through that angle. But then when he made an analysis, he saw that detection was the real problem, and that's where it really mattered, and he sought a solution for that.
We have
and yeah, go on, James.
Yeah. And it should be live now, or maybe not. If you want to request again, Anne, we can let you ask live.
There is one other question that's popped in the chat box just in the meantime, if you want to request again, Anne. John is asking whether or not you could speak about your annual budget and how you raise money to pay for all the great work that you do.
Well, our annual budget over the last years has been around, 4.5 million euros. How do we raise that? In the last few years, our biggest donors have been foundations and other charities, which would make up about half of our budget, and especially a few big ones like the UK People's Postcode Lottery, which give us core funding. Then we have, of course, the public, the people who adopt HeroRAT. There are thousands and thousands of enthusiastic people who contribute $9 per month, but all that makes up about 20% of our budget. And then besides that, we have some donations or some contracts with UN organizations and with governments. In the last year, the government contributions have strongly raised. Both the US government, the Swiss government, and the Belgian government are now stepping in with major landmine funds.
Okay, so I think Anne's here to ask a question.
Oh,
so close. There is one other question that's popped in, so whilst we wait for Anne to come back, how exactly do you know how big a landmine field is? Oh, sorry, Anne, I'm asking one more question, and then we'll let you grab the mic. So how do you know exactly how big a landmine is?
How big a landmine is?
Yeah.
Well, typically there are anti-personnel landmines, which are a few hundred grams, and anti-tank landmines, which are a few kilos. Now, an anti-tank mine won't explode if you step on it. You need a vehicle for that one to explode. That's, of course, a much bigger blast. There are also smaller mines, which are not designed to kill, but just to maim, like to maim to rip off your foot or something. So strategically, it's said to be really effective during warfare if you want to just not kill your enemy but maim them.
But go talk.
But for HeroRAT, there's no much difference. She detects the explosives, and then somebody will come with a probe, which is like a screwdriver, and he will spot a landmine, and he'll probably have a good idea of which mines are around. Because typically in one area where we are working, there's a limited number of varieties of mines being used. So we typically know the mine which we can expect.
Over to you, Anne.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, I was just wondering, are the dogs in danger because they're heavier than a rat to set off a mine if they step on one?
Well, that's a good question. That's, in fact, one of the advantages of the rat. They are allowed to scratch as much as they can because they're always too light to set off the landmines. But with a dog in the training, we need to have an extra step of training. So the dog has to, back off and sit straight. So a dog is not allowed to scratch. And also, he would typically not set off a landmine by just walking over it. Even he would probably be too light, but you never know. So the dog sits back, and we never had an accident with the dog.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's another question in the chat box. Probably runs on quite nicely from Anne's question. What is the field mortality rate of the APOPO animals? That's quite a broad question, actually. So I'm assuming you mean both dogs and rats, Julie? We'll go with both, maybe.
Well, the mortality rate, well, we choose those specific rats because they can live up to 8 years. We typically have them working 4 to 5 years, just as we have our dogs. And that is not because they die from landmine explosions or something, because we never, ever had a rat or a dog dying from an explosion. Of course, it happens that an animal dies from disease, but then again, we have very good animal welfare and daily checks, weekly checks by a vet, and always have the backup of a professional vet clinic. And typically our animals live longer and probably much longer than they would live in the wild.
Other questions just popped in, asking whether or not the rats are vaccinated.
Yes, the rats are vaccinated against rabies, and the rats are also neutered before we export them from Tanzania, because imagine if they would start breeding in another continent, in Cambodia or even another country within Africa, we would not like that. So all rats which are not working inside Tanzania are neutered.
I think you've probably answered this one, Christophe, but Catherine asked how do the dogs survey the potential landmine areas without triggering the landmines? I think you kind of explained that one off. I'm just making sure we're covering off all of these questions. I'm wondering how the communities feel before and after the minefields are cleared. I would imagine that stress would decrease quite a bit. I'm not sure if you would know, but does some of this stress remain even after the mine is cleared?
One thing I know is that the farmers start farming immediately, like immediately after we leave. And unfortunately, especially in Cambodia, some of the farmers are already farming before we come because of the land pressure. It's unbelievable. And you see the difference, like in Cambodia, this is kind of open. In Africa, it's like almost more fenced or clear, like this is a minefield, don't come here. But in Cambodia, the minefields are so vast, and it's so this stress must remain, of course, but people are really relieved when they have their land back. You can imagine if you have to, if that's your only, for most of the people, subsistence farms is the only source of income to feed the family, to pay the school fees and all that.
Another question that's popped in. Is it true crews play a game of soccer on the newly cleared mines, newly cleared fields to demonstrate that it's actually safe?
Yes, that we have been doing in several countries. And of course, it's always good to give that confidence to the local communities that the place is actually safe. But even before playing soccer, people have crossed the cleared minefield hundreds of times, you know, when you're moving on and when you're even walking behind your rat. So when we play the soccer game, this minefield has already been stepped over a lot.
Okay. Somebody's asked whether or not we experience arthritis in our rats.
Arthritis?
Arthritis, yeah. So joints, yeah.
Not as far as I am aware. It might have occurred, but it's for sure it's not a major problem.
Okay.
It is warm climate here.
That's true. I don't know how much time we've got, James.
Yeah, I want to be cognizant of time because the next session we only have a half hour for Noguchi. So thank you, Christophe, for kicking things off, and of course for leading this amazing organization. Emma, if you want to go ahead and jump into the next session, and then go ahead and hit go live, and then everyone here, you should see an icon pop up in the bottom to just click over the next session. I'll stick around here just to make sure that happens. So Emma and Noguchi are starting the next session. As soon as they hit go live, we should see an icon in the bottom right to click over to it. The other way to go to it is to go back and go enter that session directly from the agenda from the Run the World page. But let's just give them a minute to go live, and we should be able to click over there. Any final words, Christophe, while we're waiting for them to get started? Oh, you're on mute. Let me unmute you.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I just want to thank everybody for attending and for all the good questions. It's such an honor to have this large public attending our presentation. So thanks again.
Awesome. And then the next session from Dr. Noguchi, you're actually going to learn about how Popo's HeroRATs work to detect tuberculosis. So that should be very interesting. I know when I talked to Dr. Cindy about that months ago, it was pretty amazing to learn how that's done. Not sure. Annalise, if you're there, can you... I think maybe Noguchi and Emma are not hitting go live. If you can message them, or I'll click over there. Actually, I'll jump over there just to get it started correctly, and yeah, I'll see everybody over in the other session.